As soon as Judy Maxwell stops talking.
So you have the assembly tomorrow, right?
Yes,
What period?
7.
Moira's right.
I'm ready.
Brad will lead us in the pledge. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome everybody. We will get right into it. And I feel like I'm sitting in a hole, which I believe I am, but I believe there's a modification to the agenda.
Just one item, a supplemental personnel report. We could add that to the consent agenda.
And I believe everyone has it in front of them, and we will do so without objection. And we move on to public comment period. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because I have my golden passport already in hand, that Alice Wu is here from Fine Arts Boosters Group, which we love IPEI, we love the FADG, do a wonderful job. Alice, please go ahead.
Hi, so I'm here to represent the Fine Arts Booster Group and just say thank you to all of you for all of your time and energy and effort and love for the district, and so we appreciate you very much, and so we just wanted to give you these golden passports to the arts so you can just go to whatever shows you want without having to pay admission, which is including musicals and various other stuff.
Outstanding.
That's it.
We appreciate that. And we're talking about the big concert coming up in the next few weeks.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right,
The
that's
combined concert is, I believe, next Wednesday, the 25th.
Right.
The live concert.
excellent. And that's, if you haven't seen it, you should. It's really an opportunity. You don't see orchestra band and the choral choir, all the students in the same building, in the same room at the same time.
That's amazing.
Then they break up, but then they come back together, and it's you need to see it. Thank you, Alice. And that's everyone that has signed up. I do recognize and see a honored guest with us. An honored guest that is here tonight. Judy Maxwell, it's great to see you.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
Any words of advice after you've talked to Kate about what we should be doing, Judy Max?
Well, I would say that the Midwest and Ithaca are sort of on opposite sides of the line. That's all I have.
Maybe you should, for people who don't know who our esteemed guest is.
Oh, no. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in Ithaca or anyone who's ever seen in the last 12, 15 years of school board meetings that's not aware of Judy Maxwell's a long history with the district going back to 1960 something, I think, right?
1964.
Right, 1964. Teacher, a long time, variety of buildings in the district, Boynton eventually, and Central, I believe, but also a school board member for multiple years at least. Judy Maxwell is the one that talked to me, or at least asked, said you should run for the
I've
board.
regretted it ever since.
Then Judy Maxwell was on the board for a year, and then Judy Maxwell, who lived in our neighborhood, kind of walked over, and the cats are out walking around, and she said, "Well, you should. I think they want you to be president." So that was 10 years ago, Judy Maxwell. So it's all your fault. So, but Judy, it's great to see you, and we hope to see more.
Fixture. A fixture.
Good. And we like fixtures. So, student reps, you are in the presence of a legend. So, so Ithaca High, go ahead, impress the legend.
All right, thank you. So, some important things. Student government is starting now because the first student council meeting, which is like the local level of student government at our school, started. And their first meeting was October 4th. And the elected officers for student council this year are Anya Purcell, who is the president, Tilden Chow, who is the vice president, Ethan Merrifield, who is the secretary, and Beta Chickerman, who is the treasurer. And in the first meeting, the student council was sort of divided up into 3 different subcommittees, and each subcommittee is responsible for completing certain tasks. So there's a schoolwork subcommittee, which is focused on finding projects to complete at the school, things that the school could improve on. talking with administration. There's the fundraising committee, which is pretty self-explanatory, as well as the communications subcommittee, which is responsible for relaying information to the rest of the school. And one way that student council does this is by writing articles for the Tatler. And currently the reps, also I recently talked to the Tatler, and we will be having a monthly sort of section that the reps of the board will have to report to the school on important things that are going on in this meeting. And soon we'll be sending out, the reps are planning on sending out surveys to students to see certain complaints or ideas that they have for the school, and maybe some things that they would like addressed to you guys here at the school board. And also, just for our information, so last year student council brought up the discussion of factoring music into the GPA system. If someone could sort of clarify what was going on with that.
Want that now?
We'll come back to it during board responses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead with your report, and then we'll answer any and all questions
All right.
at that time.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting us on the spot, though.
So last Friday, there was a freshman breakfast hosted by Link Crew, so basically a bunch of Link Crew members. Just made a bunch of really delicious breakfast items, and the freshmen really appreciated it, loved it. We were all cleared out of food by the end of the day. And just some upcoming events. Actually, this Thursday will be freshman class elections, and I've seen a bunch of freshmen starting to campaign, so they're pretty excited about that. So last week, it was big homecoming and Spirit Week. So Spirit Week started last Tuesday and went until Friday, and our Spirit Days include Twin Day, Decade Day, Flannel Day, and then Friday was Reading Bowl Day. And the homecoming game was on Friday. It was Ithaca versus Elmira. Unfortunately, Ithaca lost 6-61. It was still a really great time. The pep band played, the cheerleaders performed, and the volleyball team held a fundraiser where they painted people's faces.
Also, last Friday we had the annual pep rally, and during the pep rally the sports teams were recognized. At the beginning they all came running in, and so during the pep rally there was lots of class unity as well as overall school unity, and there were lots of events including a lip sync battle between the grades, which included teachers as well as students. The ICSD band played, K-pop dance club performed, another dance club, 607 Squad performed, as well as a nationally ranked Taekwondo martial artist who goes to our school, Taram, did nunchucks, so that's really cool.
All good?
That's the important stuff for my chest.
Very good. We'll be back with answers to questions. LACS, go ahead.
The main thing that has happened in the past few weeks at LACS is we had our annual fall retreat, and for those of you who don't know, it is where middle school and high school students go basically to the woods. This year we went to the Brooktondale Nazarene Camp, which I think is going to be our more permanent location. We were kind of trying to find a location for the retreat a couple years in the past. It's a really great place. They've got cabins and a gaga ball pit and a lodge. It's incredibly beautiful, especially in the fall. And at fall retreat, we basically just hang out. The main point of the retreat is to bond with other students and to get to know each other as a community. We participate in activities and host activities such as card games, different sorts of games and sports. A lot of Monopoly was played this year for some reason. And students also just kind of sit around, play music, play Gaga Ball, of course. Do you guys know what Gaga Ball is?
That was one of my questions.
Oh, it's basically, so there's a plastic ring, a large plastic ring on the ground, and all the students get inside of it, and a ball is dropped, and you hit the ball, and if it hits your legs, you're out, and you have to sit on the edge until there's only a few people, and so basically just a bunch of really muddy kids.
One of those
It's a ton of fun.
exclusionary activities. I don't know. Go ahead. Sorry.
So the middle schoolers leave at around 3, and the high schoolers stay to sleep over. And there's a talent show in the night where students and teachers perform. And it's always a lot of fun. A lot of funny stuff happens. And then the seniors, after the talent show, get to have our senior campfire, which is the first main event that we have as seniors as a class. We have a pretty small class. There's about 40 seniors, so we just kind of get to know each other as a group and kind of unify ourselves. And then in the morning, the seniors get up really, really early, make pancakes for all the other high schoolers, and the middle schoolers come back. We do another day of fun and activities, and it's just a really fun time to kind of come together in the beginning of school, outside of the actual school building, and bond as a community. And lots of new friendships are made, lots of new connections between students and teachers. It's just a overall really great thing. That's basically it.
Sounds great. Thanks. Board responses to anything and everything. I see a hand out in the back. Oh, go ahead.
So we have been working, the district level staff has been working with Mr. Trumbull and the administration at the high school and David Brown to look at fine arts courses and PE courses and what that would look like if it were added to the GPA. I have been communicating with Anya, who is the student council president. I've met with her and emailed with her, and we're going to share that information when a decision is made with her. And I'm happy to come to student council and talk about the decision that we make on that, and we will let you know pretty soon.
Can I get credit for playing a sport?
Not right now.
Well, I'm just trying to balance out the fine arts piece with the other piece that many are.
Well, they're also talking about phys ed,
Physical education
Yeah, well,
classes a day.
Yeah, okay, but not quite the same thing.
Come on courses.
Sure.
Yeah.
Board responses. Anything else by anyone? Brad, go ahead.
We talked at the last meeting about some of the things with lead water. I did go out to Enfield Elementary on Saturday. Thank the guys that were working overtime and doing that work, and learned that if you stand at a locked school door with a dozen donuts in your hand, somebody will open the door.
I'm not sure we want to, for security reasons, I'm not sure we want to broadcast it.
Takes a box to dump it.
But it was great.
A lot of donuts bought this week.
No, it was good to see him working. I appreciated the chance to go out and thank him for taking on this task and doing the extra work.
Right, and Brad, that was discussed in our public meeting, the amount of work that's being done, on those off hours by our own staff to replace.
Our own folks. Yep.
John, go ahead.
It reminds me that we probably need to get bigger board ID tags, but we'll talk about that later on. I also had the privilege of visiting one of our schools this past week. I had the privilege of being in Randy Beckman's first grade class with first graders, learning about their conversations around Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. And it reminds me of the type of extremely complex and thoughtful teaching that takes place. And we were having a conversation earlier about dynamic classrooms, and it's always great to see our young folks flexing their brain and asking me really tough questions like, why am I wearing a flower? So that was great, and I did not have an answer for them. But more importantly about their content around Columbus Day, they were extremely thoughtful, and that was amazing to me, a reminder that we don't have to wait until middle school or high school to engage in difficult conversations. First graders were far more nuanced than many of my college students. So good job, ICSD teachers. I'm always impressed and amazed when I go into classrooms.
Thanks, Sean. Anyone else?
A week ago, I was at LACS a couple of times. I met with Diane. She explained to me what Gaga Ball was and how it's very popular. I also I attended the staff meeting, which was a very interesting opportunity because Chris Berry led the faculty in an exercise to talk about why is LACS a democratically run school, and what are the challenges of that. And it was a really, really excellent dialogue, and I thoroughly enjoyed and was engaged participating in it. And then I also attended the senior class meeting one day, and that too was interesting. They were talking about the requirement that seniors for graduation that they complete a community service requirement. So they were talking about how they do that, and then also talking about their senior project process, all of which I found very, very interesting.
Thanks, Maura. Anyone else before we move on? I think we're good. So we will move on to the consent agenda and seeking the approval there.
I'll move the consent agenda is presented.
Second?
Second by Maura. Any questions, anything of note? It's fairly short, right? Okay. Nothing all that
You're
exciting.
not complaining, right?
Move seconded, assuming there's no, all in favor? That is everyone, and we are down 2, correct? We have a couple of folks out of town, right? So we are 2, we're 7. Right. And thankfully, my agenda is highlighted, and Dr. Brown, your highlight is always right there. So Dr. Brown,
Thank
we
you
are
for the
to you.
opportunity, Mr. Daniel. Just one item tonight. I wish to read 2 documents that I received today. This first one says, this is to certify that the Ithaca City School District Board of Education has been recognized by the Tompkins County Services Department for their support of the youth of Tompkins County. And then there's a letter that goes into characteristics of caring adults. And one is are willing to spend their time and resources to help young people. Another is to encourage youth to do their best. And it goes on, laying out the characteristics. And what will also be online are some quotes from some folks, including these 2. Individually and collectively, the ICSD Board of Education is passionate and an effective group of volunteers. Their leadership of positive shifts for young people and adults in Ithaca deserve the state and national recognition that they are receiving. Superintendent. In addition to Dr. Brown's statements, I will add that the effectiveness of the current board is related to the long tenure of most of the members. They keep running and serving because their primary focus is on the children and youth of our community. As a public education booster and spouse of one of them, I watch their televised meetings, and she's watching now. They focus on students and individuals as well as groups. The district goals for students underlie all of their actions. So this is an amazing letter, and I wish to say congratulations to the Board of Education for being one of those folks who were nominated, and is going to be receiving a special recognition by our Tompkins County Youth Services Department for all the work that you do. So congratulations. And I will share this with Jennifer to make copies for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah. Congratulations. Good job.
It's all about the golden ticket. That's it.
That's all I have.
That's all you have, Dr. Brown. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the acceptance of the 2016-17 independent audit. That was.
And we're going to the bullpen. Amanda's not here, so.
It's going to bring in the big right-hander.
You're going to bring in the righty.
Big
for
right
this
hand.
one, yeah. Give me one slide up there. So the audit committee met last week, reviewed the audit, the communication letter, the letter to management, the extra classroom account, and the letter concerning the extra classroom account. And for the folks at home to understand that the audit committee is not all members of the Board of Education. We have 3 members of the board, and we have 3 members of the public, and the committee is chaired by one of the members of the public, not by a member of the board, creating some independence for the audit committee.
And an opportunity to name those members of the public, just to thank them, Brad.
Yes, Jay True, who chairs it. Don Waddell and Frank Lee. Frank Lee.
Don and Frank have served for years now.
Half a dozen years now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we really appreciate their effort. Jay, of course.
And they're coming consistently, of course, is helpful in that they now understand the statements and, very, very helpful in that regard. So what we've put up on the board, rather than the main financial report is 87 pages, and that'll go on the web tomorrow, right? Assuming we accept the report tonight, that'll go on the web tomorrow so you can read all the detail to your heart's content. And the footnotes, which I recommend, that's where I start. I just reading the footnotes first and then go back to the statements, but you can take a look at those. But we've put this slide up before some other years so you can see where we've been over the course of a decade. If you look at the bottom line, you'll notice 3 years with brackets around them. We have reserves. People call them a rainy day fund. It was raining pretty hard. State of New York had backed off on aid substantially. The federal government, well, they had at the beginning of the economic crisis, they had some stimulus money. That disappeared. And you can see that in 11, 12, 12, 13, and 13, 14, we spent a good bit more than we were bringing in. And that was done on purpose, and I think everybody here on the board understood what was going on. We also knew it couldn't go on forever, or we were going to run out of money. You'll see that has turned around in 14, 15, 15, 16, and last year 16, 17, so that we are replenishing some of our reserves and improving our financial position.
And Brad, the gap elimination adjustment finally went away in 14, 15?
14, 15.
Right. You can see that.
And that was the year that we first got back to positive operations when the gap elimination adjustment.
It needed to go away, and it lingered.
Lingered a little too long. And,
right.
So anyway, that's kind of a 10-year history for you to look at. I'll tell you the audit report is with an unqualified opinion. There's no issues with the report. There were some management comments that we reviewed with the auditor and with management, none of which were significant, but looking for some improvements in some of the operations, and management is taking a look at those as you would expect. The audit also includes what's called the extra classroom account. That's the accounts for student activities at the 2 middle schools and the 2 high schools, and the operation of those accounts. And those who've been on the board for a while are aware that that's where we get more comments than anything else from the auditor. And it's not shocking when you've got 60 clubs and 60 club treasurers and such, you might get a few comments.
And these auditors are not the comptroller sending his auditors. So that's the state. These are our auditors that are auditing and tracking what we spend.
So the report, assuming we approve it here, will be up on the web tomorrow for those who want to take a look at it. I think everybody got it in a box here. Everybody here has it in their box. I guess what I'll say is the audit committee recommended approval, so I'll move its the acceptance of the audit.
I'll second.
And then
Second by Chris.
if anyone has questions, who was not at that meeting, I know that.
Yeah, we always we talk about this as one of the most important audit meetings of the year.
Right.
We're in that proposed budget. We're spending our proposed budget that was passed by the voters last May. That's not what this audit is auditing. It's really the year before. It is.
The operations that ended June 30th.
Right. So it is discovering what we actually spent money on that we proposed. So where are we actually in that at the end of June, and then we're in this year, and so it's always a moving target. But it's very important to know where we are at least at that point in time, so we can start planning for the next budget round, which starts. Never ends, Dr. Brown, right? It's never ends. So we're year-round budgeting, but at least that point in time gives us an idea of where our fund balance is. Did we overspend, underspend? I don't know that we underspend, but where are we in our budget lines? Were there any areas that we had to spend where we did not anticipate? special ed variety of functions.
Can you put the slide back up?
Yeah.
Thanks. I just wanted to point out one item. No, it's okay. Can you find it? Here. And I know it's hard to read there on the screen, but if you go down to employee benefits and the expenditures, just want you to see our attempt over the last few years to flatten those out. With the healthcare discussions with our unions and with our changes with retiree health insurance, and the pension expense has flattened out over the last couple of years. So I just want folks to see that. That said, employee benefits are still more than 50% of the wages in some categories, but it's
Wages and benefits.
wages and benefits. Yeah.
Right, so
We are attempting, that is the line item we've been focused on, trying to flatten out on the healthcare side if we can. And I know some people have been upset by some of the changes, and others are now quite happy with it, but trying to make some changes there. I just want to point out that, we're at roughly the number we were at in 2013-14.
right, 29 million, right?
Yeah, 29.
And that was last year, but this year is.
And I know we've had a lot of discussion about it. We keep working at it, but it's nice to see that it might actually be working.
And fund balance has improved.
Fund balance has improved, as you see. We added $3.2 million to the fund balance this year.
Right. You don't have, the fund balance numbers will be available
Well,
elsewhere, but it's.
They were distributed into a couple of different reserves
Right.
For future use.
That's not a part of the statement.
That is a part of that page. You will find it in
Exactly.
the large document. When I find it, I'll tell you the right page.
But that's something we as a board always look at quite
Focus
closely.
on and want to know where it is. You'll find the various funds when you open it. It'll be page 20 and 21.
Somewhere. Any other questions, comments? This is annual. Same time every year. We're audited throughout. Basically, they come in August, but they give us heads up, and the auditor's here.
I think this has to be in by the 15th to the state.
Right. So we kind of have to vote on it. Sean, go ahead.
The only thing, just a quick comment, I've almost been serving this entire time, and I know a couple folks have been serving this entire time as well. But it's reminded me of the kind of work that we've done to be this point in time, to have a conversation about being somewhat more financially strong, or not. We're not strong, we still have a long way to go, but we're not like some of our other neighbors who are struggling. And also, more importantly, the way we shift the conversation. So, budgets are a reflection of values, and so the things that we used to argue about and debate over are not up for conversation. We're all on the same page about funding projects and programs for young people. And so it's a reminder to me of how far we've come from where we were 8 or 9 years ago about the conflicts that used to take place in the board as well. So good financial management. Thank you to our team. Thank you to our board members. Thank you to our community. I think that the audit sort of reflects that as well. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was one of the few times we've actually made progress, right? That we're making some progress in terms of even how we're categorizing and recording some more things. So they weren't as mad at us, our auditors.
And go ahead. Go ahead.
Piggybacking on what Sean just said, to Brad's point, he's the one who articulates this the most simply and consistently. So that doesn't give us the right to sit on our laurels. It actually should create a foundation for us to be more brave, more experimental, and to keep pushing for what all of the students need. So I'm not satisfied with the status quo. That's why we ran. We have the talent. I expect us to be here. Now what? Agreed.
Anyone else? Are we good? We'll ready to vote. Move seconded, I believe. Chris seconded. All in favor? And that is everyone.
I mean, Judy Maxwell would expect nothing less.
So exactly, and so we're another athletic merger that I have in front of me, and they want you all to authorize me to sign. Samantha's not here.
I'll move the merger with Montessori for boys modified basketball, girls modified basketball, and boys modified wrestling.
Second.
Second by Maura.
Do we know how many students?
Yeah.
That's my only difficulty.
Says a very small number.
See, this
Do we
is,
know what that means?
see, now we're getting into the, it seems seemingly we would have no lack of candidates for modified basketball for any of our kids.
Yeah, so I was a little surprised by basketball. so
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
I'm gonna get an answer to you in just a second. I'm trying to ask Samantha now, she doesn't know that.
You know, wrestling,
Wrestling.
if you like wrestling, if you want to wrestle, you can. Too much touching, I don't know. But it's all right. But it's a great sport. But I was surprised by basketball. How many teams do we have? A and B?
Yeah, what do we have, 7th grade and 8th grade, is that what we do?
That's what we normally have.
Oh, there's not 2 7th grade teams. It's just, I'm looking at, it's been a while.
Yeah, we have those 2 teams. I'm waiting on the answer about how many students are going to be included.
We,
Skip numbers, I should have had that earlier. So.
I mean, it is Montessori. We realize there's typically not a large
Yeah, I think it's more
population.
about just giving them an
It may be one, but
Yeah, the other mergers we've seen have had 1 or 2 students. Or 2 students, so I'm just curious what the number was. I'm going to suggest we
Can we,
table it.
Yeah, I'll have it.
Not for the next meeting, but table it for the end of this meeting.
Yeah.
can we vote on tabling, or do we have to vote on
I
tabling?
think the chair can just decide.
We'll just, we're going to table that, okay. Until we have a bit more information. It has been moved, seconded, held in abeyance for a little bit. I'm not even looking at Kate. Well, I'm just going to, we're just going to go ahead and do this. So,
Roberts takes a holiday.
yeah. It's post-Indigenous Peoples' Day, so we'll go with it. Let's move on to the policy, and Sean, please, go ahead.
We have a policy on the agenda, policy 5405. I'm not going to move it at this point in time, just to get through some questions and see how folks want to proceed. The policy is about student wellness. It's up for a second reading. Some of the policy is required by federal regulation. Thank God Kate's here to give us all the great stipulations of New York State law as well. But we've had a couple of questions that have arisen by some of our board members, and so maybe we can begin there and see if there are other questions that folks have, or maybe I can just start saying if there are other questions or comments or concerns folks have about this policy, we can entertain those first. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, it just occurred to me today, having taken a glance at the NYSBA publication on board, and there was an article that it had something to do with a district assessing their mental health services. And I realized that this health and wellness policy says nothing about mental health. And it seems to me that that's a lack.
Assessing their mental health services, meaning,
How well are they doing? How well are their...
right, do they offer, what is it?
Right, what are they offering, and are they serving the needs?
Right.
So that may be outside the scope, but that's something for us to at least entertain and have a conversation about. We can definitely do that. It's in my notes as well.
Seems like that could be a policy 5405.1 for you to deal with going forward.
Definitely could be. Could have that conversation.
I mean, I take it here we're trying to follow a model
Yeah, I think so.
to some degree.
Yeah.
But I had a couple of just questions that sort of in my more thorough reading when I had some time to sit back. Just as an example, one is in section 1A. The first bullet point said that school district will include fruits, vegetables, salads, whole grains, and low-fat items, at least to the extent required by federal regulations. That made me uncomfortable. I understand that's what law states, but I'm sure the Fed regulation is probably a very minimal standard. We may want to keep that in policy, but that's something for us to pay attention to. The other things that Ann pointed out, same thing. We say an adequate amount of time for lunch or breakfast, but we don't specify the time. We are having a conversation back and forth via email. There's no Fed regulations, I understand it, and no New York State regulation.
That's correct.
Of what there are best practices that are out there. We as a district can on our own put times in if we choose. Ann was asking, what does it mean for slow eaters, or what does it mean for other students? Should we as a district think about mandating a time and holding folks accountable? That's one notion. Similarly, around notions of recess.
Yeah.
There's no mandated time that recess must take place, both Fed and state, right? we as a district can, again, be our prerogative if we wanted to say or indicate what would be a requirement or a minimum time. That's one other suggestion. And then lastly is what I've been doing a little more thinking about as well is this idea of whether or not companies who provide food are able to market during the school day or outside the school day. And what does it mean? We're having a couple of conversations. One, is it the Powerade court case? Is that what I was reading?
Yes, Powerade, yes,
Right.
pouring rights contracts.
Right, so,
Nothing to do.
or if you know, someone's providing services of that doesn't count. Usually it's contracts, right? Contracted services, is that what it's really about?
Yes, and an issue in those cases, Sean and I were talking about this earlier today, there were a series of litigated cases in 2002 regarding the authority of school districts to enter into contracts for pouring rights with soda companies, Coca-Cola and the like, and then a corollary issue that came out of that was, well, when you do enter into a pouring contract, the commissioner held that was legal, but then what if the entity that you're contracting with wishes to put the Coca-Cola logo on the side of the vending machine? And the commissioner said that even though that could be viewed as commercial advertising on school premises, it was an incidental commercial advertising. So the current status quo in New York State is that that kind of incidental advertising does not violate New York State law. But we now have this federal overlay from the USDA regulations that make us want to be mindful about not advertising products that are not consistent with the state or with the federal health standards or nutritional standards. So that in their infinite wisdom, USDA has said we don't require you to tear down your existing vending machines or to look at your existing contracts. But as those contracts become due and you're renegotiating them or revisiting them, the advice is please be mindful of, are you advertising products that you don't necessarily want to be advertising from a health standpoint as a school district. So there's probably more information, but.
No, this is the joy of policy committee. Come join us. This is what we engage in. And so I'm not sure as a board, I mean, the more I was reading this, the more I was thinking that we probably have another 2 or 3 questions, and not that I hate pushing policies forward that haven't been answered, but if we feel like we're ready and can answer these or pass this policy and answer them afterwards, I'm happy to proceed in whatever way the board thinks is advisable.
So Sean, are you answering questions or are you going to change language within the policy?
Well, that, you know,
I mean, that's...
If, for example, if we decide as a board, I think as a board, maybe we should consider some sort of minimum recess time, then that would change language. If we think, no, we'll leave it as is, which says the language may be...
Maintain the daily allotment.
Right. But there's a phrase that we use as well. Oh, just maintain daily allotment, right. We don't say daily time. But we do say adequate lunch time. So we do use the word adequate, but we don't define what adequate is. Right. So it's a question for the board real quick.
And Sean, I will add to that is borrowed, that is the federal standard, which is that we're required to provide adequate time. And of course, there's no gloss in those regulations for what adequate means. So the feds have left that up to each district to define for themselves what that means, what adequate entails. So we can leave it broad as adequate, or we can be more specific.
No, right. Go ahead.
What are the current amounts of time allotted for lunch for elementary school students? Do you know?
Between 20 and 30 minutes. It's never less than 20 minutes for the actual eating time, sitting at a table. That's not including standing in line. It's usually 30 minutes.
And as I read, best practices tend to indicate at least 20 minutes of sitting time is what most folks recommend. And the same thing for recess. At least 20 minutes of recess is what people say are best practices. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but that's what we're reading.
So I guess my follow-up question is, does the 20 minutes start as soon as the student sits down with their food?
It starts in general, so like if the second grade comes in, when most kids are sitting down, then it's about 20 minutes from there. They have a set time that is usually there's 30 minutes in the cafeteria, but they try to make sure that all kids have at least 20 minutes of sitting down, and so they will. Most schools have somewhat of a fluid, although it's on a schedule, second grade comes at this time, leaves at this time, there's enough room for some overlap. And they always have you 4 kids can sit for another 5 minutes because you still have all this food on your plate and you're obviously still eating. We don't make kids leave if they're still eating.
And take the food away and throw it out. Right.
Exactly.
We hope.
Do we put a minimum and a maximum?
these are just questions. We don't have to, we can leave the policy as is. As the policy is currently written, we comply with the Fed mandate that we have. The question we've always asked ourselves is, that doesn't mean that's what we want to do in our district. It can be what we do in our district, and we can still leave it flexible and still have some other practices. But this is a policy, and bear in mind that some of these policies have not been changed since 1967. So this has potential to be around for another 50 years.
Then maybe we don't want to be dictating times.
That's right. So,
Right, and we don't want to be in the position that the feds are dictating, well, anything to us, frankly, much less how long we have lunch. So it's really is our choice.
so
Vagueness in laws,
Well,
vagueness in
but I'm hearing an idea that maybe we keep pushing down the policy, and if we have to make changes, then we can always come back and always do a revision. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
So then I move policy 5405, student wellness, for a second reading and adoption this evening.
Second.
Second by Moira first. Any other questions? It is a long policy, and you all have spent a lot of time on it, and we appreciate that. Anything else? Can we vote? I'm saying, okay, all in favor? That's going to be everyone. So excellent, thank you very much.
And the next policy, I'll move these and then we can talk about them. I move policy 9820.2, terms and conditions of employment for managerial employees, and 9820, terms and conditions of employment of confidential employees, for first reading this evening.
Second.
And this is a policy that's been on the books. Our last revision of this policy was in 2009 to both policies for both managerial and confidential employees. The change for this policy is in Section 8 of both policies and Section 9. It's reflecting our current practice around healthcare and healthcare changes. Is that pretty fair and simple?
Yes, I think we're pretty familiar with what we're trying to do.
Yep.
Right.
I would add that this is a policy that we did not go through. We've been trying to pay particular attention to things like gender pronouns and the usage of gender pronouns in policies, of when and where they do apply. We did not change in these ones. We just changed those sections. At some point in time, if need be, this policy will be coming back our way. If we ever get to the 9,000 series, we'll be headed back that way, and we'll do more work then.
There's a 9,000 series?
Wow, we're making more slowly, Rob. We're like, I don't know where we're at.
Where
4,000. No, we're 5,000. I'm giving us the 5,000 series. So,
don't we still have some stuff in the 4,000s that we haven't
More, we're being optimistic. We're just looking to the future. The language in both policies is the same.
That's right.
So both in 9820 and 9820.2, sections 8 and 9, the language has been changed.
Okay. Makes sense to me. First reading.
First reading.
Not second reading. This is just for this first reading.
I'll be right back on the next board meeting for hopefully adoption.
All good? All in favor? That's everyone. Moira did second. Moira second guy.
I second that,
definitely, yeah. And there's lots of reading and not a lot of pictures here. Where's the end? I need pictures. Is there anything? I see PTA schools, et cetera.
Just in case anybody had an update.
Oh, okay.
Well, as long as we're talking about policy, I want to say two things about policy. One is we just passed a policy, the wellness policy. And one of the things that I've been concerned about is that we have a mechanism that people who need to be in the know are aware when a policy has been passed. So I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but I just want to ask the question every single time we pass a policy, how are the people who need to know that this is a new policy going to be made aware of that?
And our communication team that's engaged in this conversation, and we're thinking about the staff update, which goes out monthly, and also the insider. So we could probably put it in both publications, so it'll go out twice per month as it ships.
Yeah, I think when maybe a regular section in both those places makes sense. This is also a policy that, unlike some of our other policies, that we actually have a point person that's named in the policy.
Right.
So the athletic director and director for wellness will be responsible for communicating this to all the folks. And also, if I'm not mistaken, finding building coordinators, building site coordinators.
Right.
And also, I think would task them. But you're right, as a process and a practice, we need to do a better job and think about that more intently.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk about that, I hope.
And then related to my concern about a wellness policy that says nothing about mental health. And I'm not sure that policy is the way to address my real concern, which is how are we doing with providing mental health support and services to our students. But at least I need to know that we're looking at this and it's on our radar, because I feel very strongly that it's becoming a very, very significant issue at all ages.
A quick response, we're having the same conversation at Ithaca College, and it seems to me that this would be appropriate for the board officers to have a conversation about maybe having a session at a board meeting, that it warrants us having a larger conversation as a community. So we'll follow up with that as well. I think that's a great suggestion.
Brad?
Or do you need to bring back the Montessori merger?
No, exactly.
Do we have an answer?
Yes, they did not give us a specific number, that's why it's not there, but they said no more than 5. We think it's no more than 5. So we can table it in conversation with her.
I'm going to move to table this.
I suggest we
next
table
meeting.
it.
Because that would be no more than 5 across
Right.
4 different sports, or
Three.
Right.
3 different?
Yeah.
Three in one
We've
sport.
been waiting for a number, and
Right.
then we got it from the thing.
I move to table.
Second.
Second by Sean. All in favor? That's everyone. Will just table that and come back. And now we're still back at the end. Still back at the end. Okay. Any other items by the board? Any students? Folks in the back? Anything else you want to bring up? Other than we all should get together and have a great time out on the list. I think that's
Play Gaga ball.
actually play Gaga ball. But it sounds great. Upcoming dates. Obviously, we're back here next week on Tuesday. A variety of our work sessions.
HR and finance next Tuesday.
Right.
The professional development this week. That you're all engaged in.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Right.
When is that?
No, that's the conference.
The conference.
When did the...
Oh,
The school board
okay.
conference.
I
Ms.
thought
Bud.
this was another session on Tuesday.
So that's coming up. We'll see. Be interesting to see what's going on at the state level. But it's happening. I think it's happening here. But it's all good. We'll see what's going on in the rest of the state. And then, but other than that, are we good? Anything else? With alacrity, we will we'll close our business for today. And one last note. Since I thought I was going to lose my voice and not have it tonight, but Cornell did beat Harvard on Saturday, and that was so I'm still happy from that. So hasn't happened in 12 years. We are done. Thank you, everyone.
Big win last night too for some of us.